Facing uncertainty. This Torah portion is about the story about the spies and them being sent out to the promised land, facing immense uncertainty. Because for years and years, generations, they have been in Egypt slaves. And they've heard about the promised land. They've got messages from the fathers about the promised land. But they haven't been there. Let alone a journey of several thousands, hundreds of thousands of people through the wilderness. Imagine the logistics to the promised land. Immense uncertainty. And as I was preparing, I couldn't resist adding this picture. That's us. That's my family and I. We have had several trips over the southern parts of Africa a few years ago, when we were young and beautiful, and now we are young and beautiful. And so I'm not allowed to show any pictures of any residents of that cruiser during those trips. That will become dangerous for me. But what we realized, there are many lessons that we've learned through all those trips. And I'm going to share a few more pictures later on. Is that the difference between uncertainty and certainty, between chaos and clarity, between being totally in angst about where you are and where you're going to sleep and where you're going to find food, the difference between all of those is one conversation with a local. One conversation with a local, and all the angst, and all the uncertainty, and all the spanning. Where are we going to sleep? Where are we going to get the next loaf of bread? Where's the next filling station? All of those questions disappear. One conversation with a local. And this is the story of the spies. One conversation with a local can change your total perspective in terms of your current situation. And so, in all the trips, we've never been lost. One conversation with a local. Because you're still here, still on this earth. Somebody knows where you are. This was before cell phones, before GPS, before Tiki Box even, because it doesn't work there. It's you, the cruiser, and the paper map, and the local. But it involves a few things, because it means that you actually have to speak to the local. In other words, you actually have to get out of the cruiser and ask. That's a big thing. Then you must be able to understand the local. After you have found the local. And then the local must understand what your needs are and have an answer to that. So there are a few things. But this story of the spies today, Shalach, unpacks all of that. It's the one conversation with a local that provides us with such clarity in terms of where we are and where we're going and how do we get there. But before we do that, a bit of reflection. I've shared last week that most of today, I've actually prepared for last week and I got it a bit confused. So a local spoke to me and sort of put me on, and sort of straightened me out and say, no, you've got it all wrong here. And in realigning me, I realized that it's an amazing package between what Johan shared 2 weeks ago, this week, and then last week. So I'm going to try to put those dots together. So Johan spoke about the people being launched from Sinai to the promised land with an inspiration from the Most High. Incredible number 6. This is how you bless the children of Israel. Say to them, Yodevavai bless you and guard you. Yodevavai makes his face shine upon you and show favor to you. Yodhe-Vavhe lifts his face upon you and give you peace. And they shall put the name of Yodhe-Vavhe, the creator of the universe, the one who has rested on the Shabbat, that has said everything is tof off, on the Bnei Israel, and he shall bless them. The weight of that blessing rests on each one of us sitting here today, and a few million other people. What a weight. And with that weight of that blessing, he said to them, I will protect you, I will provide for you, I will sustain my relationship with you, I will lift my glorious, content-filling presence towards you. Go. Wow. And so that was 2 weeks ago. So last week we then discussed the liftoff. Lights, camera, action. And in mobilizing this entire cohort of people, it's like these interlocking gears that must work together, and it's a big story to move everybody together. And discuss the tactics. How do you actually move people forward, practically? You have to have a purpose. Take the light. There's the purpose. Take the light to the nations. Take the light of Messiah forward. Your feet needs to take the light. There must be a purpose. You have to have clean hearts. Priest in order of Melchizedek. Be clean before the one whose purpose, whose light you're carrying. And Passover is key to that. Without Passover, there can be nothing. And stay obedient to the cloud. Stay with the cloud. Stick to it. But then there's practical arrangement that needs to happen. And for that we've got instruments. The silver trumpet. You trek and you're obedient to Yodhe-Vavhe. And we stood still a little bit at this prayer, which I've also prayed earlier during the introduction, which is has got so much weight that the rabbis consider it to be a Torah book, a Torah scroll in and by itself. Rise up, O Yodhe-Vavhe, and let your enemies be scattered, and let those who hate you flee before you. Which means we just have to be where Yodhe-Vavhe is, and he will scatter the enemies. And when it rested, he said, Return, O Yodhe-Vavhe, to the countless thousands of Israel. Meanwhile, human nature kicked in, because back at the camp, people started to grumble after 3 days. Human nature kicked in. And I'm reminded of the fact that despite this incredible launching ceremony, this launching pad from which they've been sent, and that they were in one camp, they were not together. Because if they were together, this grumbling would not have happened. They're physically together, but they're not spiritually, emotionally, mentally together, unified for this vision. So you can be physically together, but you cannot be echad. Because echad is you're together in terms of vision, purpose, and you go with what Yodhe-Vavhe is saying. And so you had complainers at the outskirts, they crowd, it was the mixed multitude, they lusted, and they complained. And so who's going to give us baked beans, toilet paper, bully beef, whatever the case might be? Baked beans are finished. Toilet paper finished. Who's going to give it to us? I'm making a joke of it, but it's serious stuff. This is serious stuff. Because not so long ago, the world went through some craziness and everybody went and buy toilet paper. Like I said, where can I get more toilet paper? I mean, it's funny, but sort of, why would people, if they feel in angst or in pressure is coming or uncertainty, the first thing they want to buy is toilet paper? It's like, what's going on? What sort of psychology is here at play? I don't have an answer, and perhaps you know why, but okay. And then they complain because we only have deep fried donuts. I believe it's this chapter that provided the fertile ground for the message of the 10 spies to take root. Because today we're going to go into the 10 spies and the 2 spies, and you know the story. The 12 went out and 2 came back and said, yes, we're ready, we can go, because Yodhe-Waphe is with us, and 10 said no. If it was not for chapter 11, then the message of the 10 spies would have had no impact, because they would have said to them in bulk, in mass, you're wrong, we go. But because they were in one place together, but they were not unified, they were not echad in terms of vision, mission, purpose, devoted to Yodhe-Waphe, the nonsense of the 10 spies could flourish and explode, and the rest is history. And I think there's a huge warning to us as believers, not just us as a fellowship here, but believers across the world, that when we face uncertainty, are we really together? Because if we are together, then the trains might come with evil news. We're together. We're echad, we've got a purpose. But if we're not together, if we're not focused, then the message from the evil one will actually be able to find fertile ground, and it will grow. So it's not a question of if there's going to be trouble. It's a question of when. But the real question is, are our hearts united with Yodhe-Waphe, with the ark, with the cloud, that your enemies be scattered, let those who hate you flee before you, and return to the thousands of Israel. Because if we're there, then we don't have to be afraid. And we will be united in that situation. So, while it's sad to read chapter 11 and to see how it has played out in terms of the division, and a journey that should have taken a few weeks or months took them 38 years, and the death of many people, it's actually a massive warning to us. The problem is not the 10 spies. This is the problem. Because 10 spies would not have had a message if it was not for chapter 11 that provided them with the space within which to operate. So, how is the story unfolding? Just quickly, I've said last week that I believe there are a few trains heading our way in terms of a perfect storm. And I'm going to share something around that later. But I think we have to try and understand how this story unfolded within the Torah, so that we can position what is heading our way and put it in the right context. But the 10 men who had gone up with him, Caleb, so I'm getting halfway into the story. Caleb had given his report, and he said, yeah, there are big gooders there, but Yodhe-Waphe is with us, let's go. And then the 10 men reported, and they said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they have the children of Israel an evil report. They gave them an evil report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone as spies is a land eating up its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great size. When it says eating up its inhabitants, it means eating up its inhabitants. They ate each other. So it's not in a figurative sense. The book of Yashar is rather explicit of what is happening there. They were eating each other. So This is not figurative of speech. This is real. This is what they're doing. And we saw there the Nephilim, sons of Anak, of the Nephilim. Those were the guys doing the eating, by the way. And we were like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and so we were in their eyes. And they said, we can't do it. But here's a very interesting, if you would have made a movie of this or dramatize it in a play, this is how it happened. There was an instruction, and the instruction we actually get in Deuteronomy, because the whole story, Deuteronomy, the book of Deuteronomy starts with the story of the spies. It says, go up, do Aliyah, that's the instruction, and possess it. That's the instruction that went before them. Go up and make Aliyah. Do not fear, nor be discouraged. That's the instruction. The request was, and you came near me and said, let us send men before us and let them search out. The word is ghafar. The request is, can we go and dig? Can we go and be gold diggers, data seekers? Let's go and dig for data. Delve into it. But then eventually what they did is, and the matter was good in my eyes, so I took 12 men, 1 man from each tribe, and they turned out and they went into the mountains and came back to the Wadi Eshkol, and they rachal. What they actually did was to slander and backbite. So there are different things at play here with different words. They got an instruction, go at Aliyah. They asked, can we dig? They came back with rachal. So you can see how it went from a message and an instruction, how it got distorted, and then what was the end of the distortion. And that is because they deviate from the instruction. They deviated from go up, possess the land, with faith, fearless. Stick to the ark of the covenant under his cloud. And by deviating from that to rachal, okay, now we need to go and dig for data. We need to understand this. We need to go and investigate this properly. And we need to understand everything and leave no stone unturned. That digging, with that digging, they developed a knowledge base themselves, an information base themselves. They started to rationalize the process, and they said, these guys are eating each other, they're big. We can't do it. And immediately that has taken their eyes off Yehovah and faith because of their knowledge base. And now they brought an evil report, slander, backbite, rachal. But you would not go up, so you would not do Aliyah, and rebel against the mouth of Yehovah. Wow. The rest is history. They did not enter into the promised land because of this. So Moses said, Aliyah, possess the land, do not fear. Function in wisdom, faith, stick to the instruction. But they ask whether they can go and dig and delve, search for gold, search for data. I think often we fall in this trap where we do Bible study, but then eventually our Bible study starts to enter into Bible digging. And you develop so much knowledge about everything that it sort of takes the eyes off Yehovah, because my knowledge is now so sufficient, I actually don't need him anymore. Moses asked the father, is it okay if they go? And the father said, yes, it's okay, they can go, but they can go as tourists. The word there is tour. They can go as tourists. And so Numbers, Shalach, sent men out to tour the land as tourists. And Moses said, okay, if Yehovah says it's okay if they can go as tourists, then it's good. But then they dug into the matter with their senses. And their senses then took over. And they brought a twisted message. And not a message of faith in Yodhe-Vavhe, but one clouded with their own rational vision and perspective. And they rebelled against the Father. Whew, are we guilty of this? Are we guilty of this? It's a simple message. He's Yodhe-Vavhe, creator of the universe. He's in control of everything. He has blessed everything. He says, stick with me, the enemies will be scattered. Yeah, but you know what? There are big goeters over there. Scorpions and snakes. And yeah, it's as if he doesn't know it. So tourists look at the surface and they take pictures, share smiles, smile and wave. Smile and wave. Miners analyze, they debate, they ponder, they fight, they rationalize. Ooh. If I may make a small confession here, perhaps it's not a small one, but it's still a confession. I've been very much part of this in terms of, yeah, but you pronounce the name like this and not like this. No, you need to do it like this and not like this. And it just divides. And it just steals and it robs the unity. And that is because of digging and digging and digging and digging. So that our knowledge is so much, but our faith is nothing. In rationalizing the situation, they rebelled against the mouth of the Father. Through rational thought and argument, they led an entire nation astray. Because they were right. The sons of the Anak was there. They have seen the Nephilim. They're right. It's not that they were not there. The inhabitants of the land did ate each other up. It's correct. The factual information is correct. It's not that they're bringing us a lie. So what they're sharing about their experience is true. But through which glasses, through which perspective? The one of digging or the one of faith? The one of believing the word of El or the word of their senses? And the kingdom is not a democracy. The majority is rarely right. So they searched for data and they transformed it into information. And this trip was postponed by 38 years. And everybody died, except 2. So the word shalach, to send out, has got a double meaning. When it is in obedience to the word of the Father, it becomes an extension of His will, and in His banner it becomes a sword. But in disobedience to His word, it becomes a sword unto self-destruction. Shalach has got these 2 meanings simultaneously. In obedience to the Father, it's an extension of His will. Or you can kill yourself with it, which is what has happened. Meanwhile, however, in Jericho, so while this was playing out, the parallel story we find in the book of Joshua, which is a fascinating story, which is the Haftarah. About 38 years later, and she, Rahab, said to the 2 men, the 2 spies, I know that Yodhe-Vavhe has given you the land and that the fear of you has fallen on us. Their perspective on the matter is, oh, crikey, the Hebrews are coming. I mean, they've got a different perspective on this. Why? And that all the inhabitants of the land melt away because of you. Oh, wow. See, it's 2 sides of the same coin here. So while we're reading the Deuteronomy story, in terms of the spies and the evil report and the sons of Anak and how big they are and how terrible they are, there's a parallel story. Meanwhile, in Jericho, what did they see? the Hebrews are coming. We're in trouble. And that all of the inhabitants of the land melt away because of you. For we have heard how Yodai-Vavai dried up the water of the Sea of Reeds. We have heard of the miracles that your God is doing, and our gods can't do that. So we're going to die. We're in trouble, guys. For you, when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites, when you were beyond the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you put under the ban. We saw your God at work, and our God cannot do that. We're in trouble. And when we heard, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in anyone because of you. So now everybody is afraid of everybody. The Hebrews are afraid of their own shadows and of what they saw and their own rationality after digging for all this knowledge. And the guys in the land, in Jericho, they were afraid because they realized it's their God against their God. So in a sense, the people in Jericho, the people in the Promised Land, their analysis of the story is correct. It's their God against my God, and their God is stronger than our God, so we're in trouble. The analysis of the situation of the 10 spies who turned it into a physical operation say, wow, these guys are big. They analyzed it in the physical. So give this to the people of Jericho. They used the right filter to analyze the situation, a spiritual filter. Their God is bigger than our God. So we're in trouble. He is Elohim in the heavens above and the earth beneath. Whew, she knows exactly who he is. And they knew it all along. Now, I haven't spoken to one of them, so I can't claim any credit to this, but imagine being in Jericho, sitting there for 38 years, waiting that they must come. Because you know they're coming. That must be a rather horrible feeling. So to know they are coming, you don't know how long it will take, but they are coming, and then their God is stronger than our God. It's finished with us. So, question is, how do we prepare for a tour? And because a tour, and that was what Shelach is about, go and spy out, go and tour. How do we prepare for a tour? Like this. Well, you ask the expert. Many of you have been overseas. You go and follow the yellow umbrella or the purple umbrella or whichever umbrella you follow. You stick to that person because that person is the local. So it's one conversation away. And between joy and angst, confusion and clarity, uncertainty and certainty. Between enjoying this trip and making it a nightmare. One conversation. So, I always wanted to do Kilimanjaro. That was the one thing on my bucket list that I never was able to do. But I've read everything about Kilimanjaro. In terms of how to access it and which roads you can take and how to get there and what to put in the backpack and what not to put in the backpack. I've asked all the experts. And so, to the point that I actually was an expert even though I haven't done it myself. And that's the difference between actually just reading about it and doing it. Because only when you do it, you can actually say, I've been there, I've done that, I have got a t-shirt and I know how to do this job. But in order to do that, you need people that can guide you. I'm going to share one short story here. I was working in Nairobi quite a while and for a few times, and so I know the trip out of Nairobi back to South Africa quite well. And this one time when the plane left, the pilot didn't put the thrust the thrusters on, he went up, and then he immediately, after about 30 seconds, leveled out. And I was like, okay, wait for the pilot to say, we've got a problem. I mean, just after we took off, he leveled off and then removed the power. And lo and behold, the pilot came back on, he said, okay, this is my route. Johannesburg, Nairobi, Nairobi, Johannesburg, this is what I've done for the past number of years. This is my route. Coming into Nairobi this morning, I had the clearest base sighting of Kilimanjaro in my entire life. And now I can't tell a story. He then said, okay, so I've asked ground control whether I can go and circle around it, low altitude. And so, in this massive Airbus, we were at the height of Kilimanjaro, circling around it. And when we're done, we flew off. Okay, it was amazing. It was like, for my entire life, I wanted to be there. And I never had the opportunity. It was always work and this and that and the other thing. And then, our father knew that. He said, okay. So, it reminded me of that story of, what's his name, Michael Lund, in the plane. It's a similar story. You've got this wish, and you just leave it there, and then one day, he grants you that wish in an even more spectacular way. Because imagine being in an Airbus, 200 meters from Kilimanjaro. It was quite special. But anyhow, back to Terra Nova, back to Earth. So, doesn't matter where we've been. In Botswana, Zambia, any other country, we were never lost. They were always a local. Without a cell phone, we didn't need a cell phone because a local helped us. Another story. Hope I can tell this one. Was part of an outreach group in 1991 that did ministry work in various different places. And we were given an opportunity, or we were invited by Middestad Evangelisasie Centrum in Hillbrow to go and minister it in Hillbrow. Perhaps you know of the place called MES, or the institution called MES, Middestad Evangelisasie Centrum. So we went into Hillbrow. The ministry center started around 10 o'clock in the evening. We did our thing. And then at the end, you sort of pick a victim. That was how, this is how we were trained, this is how you do it. You go through the thing and you pick a person, and then afterwards you go to that person, you nail that person, you start to go through the four steps, four stages of leading a person to the Messiah, to Jesus. And so I had my victim, and we were sitting there on the pavement in Hillbrow, and we were talking. And I was going through the first principle, I was going into the second principle, and he stopped me. He said, do you know Hillbrow? I said, no, my friend. It's the first time ever in my life that I've been in Hillbrow. I've never been here before. He says, have you ever used drugs? I said, no, you don't understand. I'm a Soetseentjie from the Free State. So, I mean, I don't know drugs. I don't know Hillbrow. I mean, so, sorry, guy. And I just want to push on with this story and go to the second sort of rule. And he asked me, have you ever slept in the gutters? I said, come on, bro. I mean, look, Soetseentjie from the Free State. And he got up and said, then you can tell me nothing, and you cannot lead me out of my current situation. And he got up and he walked away. And he left me there on that pavement, realizing that I'm not his tour guide. I'm not his tour guide. And in some way, he ministered to me in a spectacular fashion. Yes, I've been places, I saw places, I know the word, but I can't be his tour guide. And I can only pray that Father will send him a tour guide. Because there's a tour guide for everybody. Now, what if nobody went before you? What if it's mission impossible? What if nobody went before you to a certain place? Because that's where the spies was. That's their situation. Nobody available for guidance, no tour guide, no expert. Go to uncharted territories without anything. What then? This is not for every Tom, Dick, and Harry to take this cruise on, because it requires faith. That's the story of the spies. We're often very quick to judge them. How could you have done this? You've got Numbers 6 and Numbers 8. I mean, you've got all of this, and then you got derailed so badly, so quickly. Meanwhile, Jericho was petrified because they were able to analyze it correctly. They had no tour guide that went before them. So we're quick to point out their mistakes. But then we realize that we're actually often in the same situation. Because there will be a people, a generation in future who will be sent to the tribulation. There's no tour guide for that. There's no manual for that. There's nothing. Scripture is saying it's a time like it will never ever be before. There's no tour guide for that. You cannot, there's no babies, no cell phone. Or wait, perhaps there is. Perhaps there is. And so I believe this is what this week's Torah portion is trying to tell us. What is that tour guide? To take you through very, very uncertain situations and circumstances going forward. These were the names. And Yodai spoke to Moshe saying, Shelach, send men to spy, to tour out the land of Canaan, which I am giving you, the children of Benai Yisrael. Send one man from each tribe, their fathers, everyone, a leader among them. And by the command of Yodai Moshe sent them from the wilderness of Paran, and all of the men were heads of the children of Israel. Now, if you're like me, when you get to a list of this, all these names and all the begats, it's very nice because you just skip over them, because it helps and you sort of reduce the time of reading and you carry on. There's a taker of that one. These are the names of the men of whom Moshe sent to spy out the land. And Moshe called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Yeshua. So there's Joshua also in the mix. And but this time around I sort of parked and I asked myself, now perhaps there's a message in these names and in these people. Because firstly, it's a very strange order that we get them. It's not a birth order. The birth order is Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan. Levi has been scratched out because he's been taken out to be the priest, and Joseph has been split into two there at 11. This is not according to the birth order. Because the birth order, if you would like to birth order, then it would be 1, 2, 4, 9, 11, 12, 10, 11, 5, 8, 6, 7. It's scrambled. So it's a very interesting order in which it has been given to us. It's also not the order in terms of how they've been positioned around in the camp. It's almost random. So these were the tribes, the spies' names, and the fathers' names. I then started to look at what the meanings are of those names. So let's start with the tribes. And we try to see whether it makes sense to us. And we try to make a sentence out of it. See the Son, he has heard, and he is worthy to be praised. His reward is with him, and those who are with him will be fruitful. They will be the sons of his right hand. To them he will provide a dwelling, and cause them to forget Egypt, because he has judged the nations, but blessed his own. Those who wrestle with him are truly blessed. Like, what? What message is that? And he is sending them off and say, the Messiah, the Son who has heard, is the provider of land and identity who blesses you. And that's embedded within the names of the tribes. If it was not structured the way it is, then this message would have been scrambled. If they've gone in terms of the birth order or in terms of how they were organized around the camp, you would not have had this message. But this sequence, this order, gives us this message. Well, if it's true for the tribes, what's the chances that something like this can happen with the names of the spies itself? The renowned judge, the forceful and faithful one, will redeem, since he is the one who saves and delivers his own. He is the heir of their fortune, yes, their fortune. He is the heir of his people. He conceals his people, and he cherishes them with affection. He is the majesty of El. Within the names of the spies, he says the Messiah is the deliverer and the Savior. What a message. Is it possible that there will be something similar in the Father's names as well? We will remember that our fathers were nomads, but he will prepare us. He will add to us continuously without stopping, and he will heal us, and he will be our confidant. We will skip for joy as our burdens are removed, because who is like El? He is our increase. In him I will decrease and be humble. Messiah, the all-powerful. 3 different dimensions. The names of the tribes, the spies, and the fathers of the Messiah. And he tells them, I will be your tour guide. I will go with you. Send out these men with these names, and embedded in those names, to us it's just names. May I highlight one name to you? I couldn't have with a chuckle. It's the second one from last, Whoopsie. So, I would not recommend that if you're going to have a child in future. Whoopsie. But okay. But in any case, I must say I haven't seen that before. But okay, so even Whoopsie is there. But in these names, he's providing us with a map. To us, they were names, 36 names, 12, 12, 12, 36 names. But they know the meaning of their names. They know why it's this order. They got this as the tour guide. I will be the provider. I'm the Almighty, and I will be with you. So now what we've done is we've read it in terms of the tribes' names, the spies' names, and the fathers' names. But let's put it all together and see what happens. To see the Son, that's a tribe. Renowned, that's a spy. Whom we will remember, that's the fathers of the first one. He has heard, he is the judge of our nomadic fathers. He is worthy to be praised, forceful and faithful one. He will prepare us. His reward is with him. He will redeem and he will add to us. We will be fruitful, since he is the one who saves continuously. The sons of his right hand, whom he delivers and heals. He will provide a dwelling, the heir of our fortune and our confidant. We will forget Egypt, because he is our fortune, and we will skip for joy. He has judged the nations as the heir of his people and removed our burdens. He blesses his own and conceals his people, who is like El. Those who wrestle with El, he cherishes with affection. He is our increase. We are truly blessed. He is the majesty of El, and I can add nothing. 36 names. These are the names. Tribe of this, spy of this, father of this, who was the father. And he's sending them with this message as their tour guide. Wow. I think this is phenomenal. So, meanwhile, today, we are at the train station. I've mentioned last week that there are 5 trains heading towards us. And they are... I need to be careful here because I don't want to give the impression that these trains are mighty, or that they are the Anakim, or that we have to fear them. I want to share these 5 trains, but the focus is this. That's the tour guide. And I believe that's why our Father has given us the tour guide, so that we can go to the train station and face the trains coming our way. Are they 5? Are they 4? Are they 6? I don't know. I'm going to give some names to them. You might say, no, wait, change this name to this name. It's fine. Let's not get hung up around the names of these 5 trains. Let's not make these 5 trains into idols, or build something around these 5 trains that's not supposed to be. But I think we all are aware that there are things happening, and we hear the rumbling of it as if they're in a tunnel. They're not yet outside, but we hear there is rumbles. And so at one point in time, we might actually see them. So the first one I was very hesitant to put on, because I know it invokes a lot of, let's call it emotion, and because people have got different perspectives on it. But irrespective of your perspective on it, the climate is crazy. Whatever the source, I believe it's Deuteronomy 28. Because Deuteronomy 28 deals with the blessings and the curses. And around the curses, about 70% of those curses are climate related. So, you may have heard in the news that, it's hard to talk about it today given what we've been through, but of a massive El Nino that is coming. Massive drought, massive warm weather, and it has been officially declared an El Nino season earlier this week. Now, it has not yet hit South Africa, but it's coming. And but I'm reminded of, and I've got Genesis 47 there, which is the story of Joseph. Now, the story of Joseph covers many chapters. It's just sort of highlighted one there, but the entire story of Joseph was started with cause of climate nonsense. I mean, climate sort of started that whole process. And we know what happened as a result of that. Something really good came out of it. Food has been weaponized. The entire food system has been weaponized. It's somehow related to the climate, but it's not exclusively related to climate. The food system has been weaponized, and accessibility might become a problem. Again, Genesis 47, the story of Joseph. If you think about the story of Joseph, you sort of torn between 2 places here, because the first one is Joseph is on our side of the fence. He's our guy. And but in the process, what he has done is he has led, and through his policy, for cash to be crushed in Egypt. It became a cashless society. We're heading towards that at the rate of knots. And in the process, what happened during that period was that there was a massive wealth transfer. And in the end, Pharaoh had everything, because everything was given to Pharaoh, and they had nothing left. I'm reminded that this is not exclusively in the story of Joseph, that in many other situations, you could not even buy barley or wheat or anything using money. And they had to sell themselves. And you immediately say, but Joseph was responsible for this system. He introduced the system. Now, isn't Joseph a type of Messiah? I mean, if we look through beautiful glasses when we look at Joseph, he did it. It's his handiwork. And then Big Brother is watching and looking after every single step of you. Again, we're thinking of Joseph and his story. We're thinking about what happened in the book of Daniel. And here we are now, in a sense, torn because what's his name? Joseph was instrumental in getting this setting this up. And I'm asking myself the question here. Joseph was a type of Messiah. He brought this system in for an explicit purpose to protect and strengthen the people of our Father, but also to create a situation whereby they could be released and relieved through Moses. Take the time span away. A situation has been created by a type of Messiah for another type of Messiah, Moses, to remove them and to fulfill the opportunity. Put them together. Take the time frame away. Messiah at work, judging the evil, taking his people out simultaneously. And you see Joseph and Moses working simultaneously. Perhaps we're going to see that. Joseph and Moses working simultaneously. What about AI? I think AI is an enabler of all these. But whatever it is, a perfect storm is being created. Because currently these 5 trains are all in tunnels. We haven't seen them operational yet. But it is as if when they come out of the tunnels and they're out in the open, instead of crashing into each other and destroying each other, they're going to realize that they are on the same track and not destroying each other. They're going to mutate and strengthen one another. And they're going to become bigger and bigger because they will reinforce each other, making this massive train. So instead of them destroying one another or each other, they build up this gigantic train. So, the Anak, it's crazy. They're going to eat us up. We're like grasshoppers. We can do nothing. And we saw there the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, of the Nephilim, and we were like grasshoppers. The trains are coming. However they're going to look, we are not exactly sure. We can think and we can dig and we can wonder and we can discuss and we can sort of imagine how it might look. But they're coming. Perhaps sooner than what we think. And there's no tour guide other than the 36 words to go and face them. So an application. The perfect storm is heading our way. Climate increasingly unstable. Deuteronomy 28. Judging the world because of its idolatry, the evil situations, practices, evil speech, and everything that goes with it. Food system has been weaponized. There's hardly any food that you can find today that is actually clean and edible and nutritious. The cash system is going to be destroyed at some point in time or radically changed at some point in time. Wealth transfer is happening and has happened and likely to happen again. And Big Brother, watching every step very carefully. If you step out of line, then you're in trouble. Ask Daniel, ask his friends. They ended up in a furnace for not bowing down, even though Big Brother was watching them. It's no different than the situation today. Big Brother was watching them. Who will bow down? Those three, they don't bow down. Okay, furnace. What happens? Well, it's very simple. His enemies will be scattered, and his foes before him will be driven away, but he will return to the thousands of those whom he loves. That's what will happen. So, isn't it amazing to think that the Creator God, who is resting on the Shabbat, rest in that context means he's in total satisfaction, contentment with whatever he has made, has picked a generation at some point in time to say, I will put an entire generation in a furnace and I will protect them there. An entire generation will go through and sit in a lion's den and I will protect them there. Hallelujah. What a testimony. And everybody will be Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Daniel, Belshazzar. Everybody. So, how do we face these terrains? Facing a perfect storm with 36 words in the backpack. Because that's what he sent them off with. 36 words. See the Son, the renowned whom we will remember. He has heard. He is the judge of our nomadic fathers. He is worthy to be praised, forceful and faithful one. He will prepare us. His reward is with him. He will redeem and he will add to us. He will be faithful since he is the one who saves continuously. The sons of his right hand whom he delivers and heals. He is sending us with this. He will provide a dwelling. It might be a furnace for a while or a lion's den, but spare a thought for the lion who can't eat you, because there's a hungry lion next to you, but he can't eat you. He will provide a dwelling, the ale of our fortune and our confidant. We will forget Egypt because he is our fortune, and we will skip for joy. He has judged the nations. That is why there's both a Joseph and a Moses. Because he has to judge the nations and the evil system working together. He blesses his own, he conceals his people, who is like El. Those who wrestle with him, he cherishes with affection. Think about that. He cherishes you and me individually with affection. He is our increase. We are truly blessed. He is the majesty of El, and I can add nothing to that. So, stick to the plan. As I was praying through this and asking the Father, 36 words is a lot. I mean, I give me 3. I can remember 3, but 36 is a lot. And faith, friends, and fearlessness was basically the 3 words that sort of dropped in my spirit. That's our responsibility. Faith in Messiah. Faith in His Word. Faith in the covenant. Stick together as friends. Not just friends like, yes, I know who you are, but being together as one. With one vision, one goal. Take His light. And fearlessness. Because His enemies will be scattered in front of Him. And we're with Him. So it's not because we're so oulik. Yeah, you're oulik. I'm not saying you're not oulik, but it's not because we're oulik. It's because of Him. So I'm going to conclude again with this prayer that I've prayed last week. And then Johan will lead us further in corporate prayer also for our country going forward. Rise up, O Yodhe-Wavhe, and let your enemies be scattered, and let those who hate you flee before you, as we carry your light where you have placed us. We also pray that you, O Yehovah, will return to the countless thousands of Israel. And as we are going into uncertain times, and we live in uncertain times, very dynamic times, fluid times, many different things that's happening. We can see and hear the rumble of many trains, not just the 5 that we've mentioned, but many others as well. But protect us. Help us not to find ourselves on the wrong side of history, like where the spies went out and to dig for more and more and more and more, which then led them astray and to lose sight of you. Let us digging for knowledge and digging for information not blind our faith. Let our faith be in you and in you alone. And let us stick to your light and be the light bearers. Being together as a fellowship, being together as believers, not just this fellowship, but believers across this entire world, in unity, together. Because the Lion of Judah, the Creator of the universe, is with us. Amen.